section, which you can no longer see on the screen behind me, is entitled Where's My Robot Butler? How AI Arrived Without Us Noticing. So I've been working in artificial intelligence and robotics for about, what are we now, it's 2014, for about 14 years. Because I started when I was just 5, you know. God, I'm so old. And when I first started, my very, very first interview for my first research post, and I had read Russell and Norwood's Artificial Intelligence and Modern Approach, which is really, really accessible. It's a university level textbook. Super accessible, really, really interesting, covers the subject, in fact, the subjects that make artificial intelligence in superb amounts of depth. There's, I think we're on edition 3 now, and if you have a burning desire to learn more about the topic, get hold of Russell and Norwood, because it's still really awesome. And I came in with quite a, I have been influenced by reading a lot of Asimov. Whereas my PhD supervisor was a hard mathematician. He's, you know, done all this stuff in Imperial. I don't think it. Sorry, are there any Imperial graduates in here? I don't think he'd ever read a book for fun in his entire life. Sorry, Imperial. Actually, some of my best friends are Imperial graduates, because you know we all have to do a bit of community outreach. 2 legs, 2 feet for an insect, but it does have that kind of omnidirectional thing.
A lot of them are designed so that if you shoot off one of the legs, they can keep going. So why would you want it to be an animal? You want it to be, you know,
that's exactly the point. Is that, again, we have this tendency to look at things that we already know from nature and go, oh, we're trying to make a robot whatever, a robot dog or a robot butler or a robot whatever. When actually what we want to do is step back from that and say, okay, there are lots of really good, well-established models in nature, but we're facing, we're trying to address different challenges with different materials, so going beyond what already exists, doing something different, and actually just chucking out some of the mindset of trying to replicate something that already existed is a better way of moving forward. I just want to show you these guys in terms of elder care. So, biggest market at the moment for anyone who's working in AI or robotics is definitely the military. So, if you are an ethical black hole, that's a really good place to work. If you'd like to feel warm and fluffy about yourself, you can work in telehealth care and robotics, which is what I do, because I'm such a warm and fluffy human being, as has obviously come across during this talk. I'm a kind and caring human being there. But these are some of, I mean, this is obviously popular fiction, popular culture again, Robot and Frank. The idea of a man who is resistant to the idea of a robot companion until it turns out that it can help him commit crimes. Woohoo! And again, the idea that this thing looks very much like a human, and part of that is because when it comes to narratives, when it comes to telling stories, there's something about something that looks relatively human. That said, Luxo Jr., the Pixar logo, that is possibly one of the most relatable short bits of animation ever created with a single character. You don't have to establish anything about the character of Big Ankle Boys, Little Ankle Boys, apart from the fact that one is obviously a juvenile. So it demonstrates we don't actually need things to look human for us to care about them. But the makers of Robot and Frank decided that it would be good to have something that looked a little bit humanoid. Not least because then you can stick someone in the suit if you need to. But the Japanese have gone a very different way. I saw this in about 2004, so it's kicking around for a long time now. I cannot for the life of me remember its name. But it's for people with Alzheimer's. Now, Alzheimer's is a hideously cruel disease, and not only robs people of their ability to function in the here and now, it also tends to regress them back to very, very either infantile or youthful states where things become confusing, terrifying. There is a fear of abandonment, a need for nurture, and one of the very few things that remains in people with very late stage Alzheimer's is the need or the desire to nurture something else. Now you can't give someone with Alzheimer's a baby to look after for obvious reasons, but the Japanese came up with, I can't remember this researcher, I forgot their name, but this brilliant thing that is plugged into charge at the moment. But he sits there, he's got these huge eyes. I mean, it looks like a juvenile seal. But yeah, huge eyes. The facial proportions are all very much based on juvenile mammal style makeup. But it's very, very soft. It's warm, it has a lot of heating elements in it. Its movements are very gentle, its noises are very gentle and non-startling. And what it does is if it detects that the person who's holding it has kind of stopped interacting with it, make a whimpering noises and stroke it again. And it's basically, it's a way of, and it sounds awful, but it's a drug-free way of pacifying people with late-stage Alzheimer's who tend to spend most of their time in confusion and distress. And it would be great if we could do something to eliminate the confusion and distress of late-stage Alzheimer's, but while we can't, I think that's an excellent compromise. Much better than giving them drugs that are basically designed to just essentially sedate them, because you're still respecting their personhood. Such personhood as still remains. Whereas this is a European one. This is actually something that was finished about a year and a half ago. So this, we're talking cutting edge here. So the idea of this is it's a robot. What's it say at the bottom again? It says robots that something. Robots inspire. Oh, that's it. Robots that inspire. Yeah, robots that inspire fear and dread. And then we saw the slogan and went, yeah, oh yeah. This is a robot. Why this needs to be a robot, I don't know. There was a funding call. Someone said robots for telehealth. They went, yay, we'll build a robot. This robot will remind people to take their medicine. Why? Why do you need a robot for that? Why can't you have like a little smartphone app, someone ringing them, whatever? But no, robots are cool. We just must make robots. So they made this robot that reminds you to take their medicine. And again, this is the other awesome choice of name. They've decided to call it Hector. They know what they're doing. So basically, elder care, there's a lot of money in it, and there's an awful lot of starry-eyed, tech-led, ooh, let's build something cool that is a robot. Now, I'm going to basically make you all vomit now, but I saw this video the other day. So I work with a woman called Trish Greenhouse, who is actually a GP and sociologist, don't know this. But she's very, very good at looking at technological interventions and innovations and going, do these actually help people, or are they just built because the people who were building them thought they were cool? And she's kind of my conscience, so I hate her. Because I go, I can build this thing and it'd be really awesome, and she goes, who's it helping? It's like, me, I can get funding for it. No. Damn it. So, but I sent her this video. Now, she is in her 50s. If you've ever seen a picture of this woman, she cycles everywhere. She's fit as anything. Very, very short, steel grey hair, takes no nonsense, whatever. And I sent her this video, and I thought she's either going to love it or hate it. So, yeah. This I love. I showed it to my husband, actually, and I'll tell you what he said at the end. So this is at the time mobile phone network. It's great how the woman is confused by the concept of a video phone. More disturbing is the fact that this man appears to be confused by the concept of his baby. Realization dawns. Emotive music starts. Look at that man's face, acting.
I'd be more worried for the baby.
I know. This is the point at which my husband went, oh, the off switch is on the back! He's talking on Sunday if you'd like to punch him. Oh, had to pick me up for the first time. time is put down the box that was permanently attached to his hand. Piano music, that's how it's sad. Anyway, that's enough of feels. Who needs feels? Anyone who says technology can never replace love has never shot at love. That will build. So, this again, coming back to this whole idea of what is the human factor in technology? What is the human factor in robotics? Finally, getting away from the idea that we're trying to recreate humans or other animals. What we're trying to do is create things that will augment our abilities. The problem is that we who get given money to do fun things with toys tend to forget that the idea is to augment human experience, to augment lived social experience, not to augment the kind of stuff that we would like to do. So Trish, who is my conscience, reminds me of the human element that is very important in all of this sort of elder care robotics and care for the young is less of a problem. The reason being that for most countries that can afford to spend money on technology, the population demographic graph looks like this, with this many old people and this many younger people, which is why all the money is on robots for elder care, not robots for infant care. It's because in about sort of 10 to 15 years, the number of people who are at retirement age is actually going to be larger than the number of people who are in working age. So even if we all decided to work in the caring professions to give one-to-one care to our elderly, kind of running out of anyone to do anything else, which is why there's so much money in this. So a good place for a job if you're looking for a job in AI. But one of the problems with all of these technologies is that we have no ethical framework for dealing with them. We're finally implementing autonomous systems in people's homes and on our streets. The Google driverless car is already in operation in California and Nevada. There's an Oxford-based project that is likely to have access to the general highway in, I think it's October this year. It's finally being given the right to operate on a public road without a driver in control. So there has to be someone who can take over control. Basically has the same rights as a 17-year-old with a provisional driving license, which is very worrying. So we're coming to the point where essentially we take these existing legal statutes, like what do you do with someone with a provisional driving license, and applying them to technology, because of course they're exactly analogous. Now, one of the great things about the UK and the US and several other countries is that we have what's called a jurisprudential legal system. Now, here's a little confession. I didn't start in artificial intelligence. My first degree was in French and economics. And I started out doing stuff about things like business law and what have you. The challenging technologies is the fact that we're jurisprudential. What does that mean? So, in France and Germany, places that have, well, France definitely, places that have something called statutory laws, people have to sit down and debate all of the ways in which something could go wrong and draw up a law that legislates for all of the ways in which that something could go wrong, and then do that before anything is allowed to happen. In this country, and in the US, where we have jurisprudence, what we do is go, have at it, if something goes wrong, someone gets sued. It's basically the way we make our law. You think I'm kidding? This is a little bench with, you may not be familiar with them, the old stone bottles that used to have ginger beer in the late Victorian era. And you can see that design there is based on those stone ginger beer bottles. Now, the reason that is there in this corner of Renfrewshire, which apparently this is the site once it had been improved. It's in front of a car park. I'm not quite sure how bad it was before. But it is based on a really important case. Now, if I am, and I don't work with the smoothies, the slushies, because I can see through it, but if I buy a can of Coke, and I sip from that can of Coke, and I get a mouthful of decomposing snail, I now know who I can sue. I can sue the manufacturer. Wouldn't have known that until 1928. The reason for this is that mass manufacturing hadn't actually been around that long. And there was a case in the UK, in England, sorry, so England and Scotland have slightly different legal systems. There was a case in England in about 1926, a young woman who'd gone to a cafe, one of these modern flapper girls, hanging around with her other female friends, like a, I don't know, moral vacuum. So instead of being home, learning how to be, how to be a good wife and mother, she's out with her friends. I'm not even kidding. This actually came up in the case that she was probably a woman of not low morals but poor judgment. She'd gone to meet with female friends in a cafe with no chaperone, and had been drinking ginger beer, and there was a half decomposed mouse in hers. And so she went to the cafe and she went, "Excuse me, your mouse in my bottle of ginger beer has just made me very, very sick. I would like some compensation." And the cafe owner went, "I didn't make the ginger beer, I bought the ginger beer. It's not my house." "All right, okay." Went to a lawyer and went, "I'd like to sue the manufacturer." Manufacturer went, "You never gave me any money for the ginger beer, we don't have a contract. So I've got no responsibility towards you at all." So statute law, the law at the time, based on that civil case, said that nobody was responsible for somebody being hurt by a badly manufactured product. Thankfully, the lawyer who she went to see thought that this was utterly rubbish as a decision. And when she put adverts in the paper going, "Has anyone else been damaged by, have you been injured have you been injured by a dead animal in your ginger beer?" Now, the reason why ginger beer is very important is that it came in these sort of pot bottles that are opaque. You can't see what's inside them, so neither the retailer nor the consumer could tell until they'd swallowed half a decomposed animal that there was such in the food. And finally, about 3 years later, we found this case in Renfrewshire, that this time it was a snail rather than a mouse. And finally managed to get the judge to agree that although the person who had drunk the snail hadn't had a direct contract with the person who'd made the ginger beer, that the chain of responsibility stretched all the way back to them. And we have this thing about due diligence and negligence in manufacturing. And that law is less than 100 years old. And it seems insane to us now when you don't get anything that's made on the premises anymore. It used to be that if you went to a cafe and you drank ginger beer before 1890, they'd have made it themselves, probably, unless you're in London. But with national mass manufacturing, that only came in after the railways. That only came in when we had large factories to make stuff. So we needed new laws in order to make people be responsible for their actions. Now, I was recently talking to, this weekend, how are we going to solve all these problems before we put robots out there? Before we have autonomous robots? No, we're not. We never do. What we do is we put the stuff out there, we wait to see who gets hurt, how badly, and by whom, and then we sue them. And then in future people go, "I want to get sued, I'm going to behave better." And it's really depressing. We're going to go through a sort of a robotics adolescence where, someone's going to get run over by an autonomous car, somebody's going to be killed by the, hello.
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole debate at the moment going on around the driverless cars. Supposing there's a big accident, who do I protect?
Yeah.
The majority, the person who's in my car?
Yeah, and even humans, it's a trolley problem. Even humans, we don't have a rational answer to, if it's a choice between going one way and killing one person, another way and killing 6 people. I know it depends on if you're a benthamite or if it's, if I take the action, does that make me more culpable than if I really allow the action, and so on and so forth. You're right, these are the kinds of things that are insoluble in theory and will have to be addressed in practice. Who knows how? So we've still got
Yeah. No, I was going to say that in actual fact is one of the things I've heard is one of the biggest problems with making cars. Isn't actually the fact the argument how does it work out who to save, is in actual fact if it does run someone over, who gets sued?
Who's responsible?
Yeah.
Because the driver isn't responsible.
Yeah.
And the manufacturer say, well, we didn't. That's apparently one of the biggest obstacles is they want to know who they're going to sue if this occurs.
Yeah.
Also the problem that with a person, if they go, well, here's this, I had to run over one of these 2 people.
Yeah.
Often it's happening so fast the person wouldn't actually be able to make the decision. They just run over who's in front of them. Whereas the machine is fast enough to make it's fast enough to make the decision.
Yeah.
It's not going to sue, it's whose insurance is going to cover it.
That's very
It's going to be
yeah.
insured.
Yeah.
The biggest thing I don't know if it still is, the biggest personal ever insurance claim was the guy who fell asleep driving his car over a bridge landed on railway tracks.
Oh yes.
Yes, that
Oh,
was
yeah.
millions and millions and millions and millions. Because yeah, the train hit his car, he broke the road, there's people crashed there, the train crashed, and his personal insurance, his personal car insurance and their insurance had to pay for that. So you know.
So if I don't want to run over by, if I don't want to run over by an automated car, I could Google some money, so not to run me over, but get the other.
Make us all share our locations. Isn't it? If you don't let Google know where you are in real time, well, we can't be helped.
Sorry, that's not true. Hello?
They did actually mention that in terms of Google Glass. You know, I did an article that's suggesting that if you didn't have the Tell Google Where I Am thing in your glasses, then the self-driving cars, they wouldn't know to avoid you.
Yes, everybody
But the thing is, my Google tablet, wherever I am in Scotland, keeps telling everyone on Facebook I'm in Wales. So if that's going to be the case, I am not getting into a car and ending up in Wales. Thank you.
That's Scotland, Wales.
No.
Was that Google claimed no responsibility because they thought you were in Wales? So you were clearly in Wales, so they couldn't have run you over in Scotland, despite the fact that your lifeless body was found on a wooden glass.
Clearly just in the bottom.
So if anything we can take away from that is that these things are not without problems that need solving, and technology is really the smallest set now of the remaining problems to be solved. One of the other ethical questions that keeps coming up is, if we get to the point where you can't tell the difference between a human and a robot, do you have the right to know if your surgeon or the system on the other end of the phone that's deciding whether or not you get a mortgage, or the thing that is doing your surgery, is a human or a robot? And I don't know where I come down on this side of things. I think I'd like to know something about the background of someone who's doing surgery on me. I think I would probably tend to look up, you know, where they were trained or something. But I also rely on,
I'd like to know how good they are.
Exactly. You don't care.
I want the robot.
Yeah. Well, this
Well, I was
is
thinking exactly that.
yeah. You
Sue someone.
it's like, yeah. You anticipate me, so. Sometimes you want to know that you've got a robot because you want to know how likely it is to get under the finger. But then if you haven't seen it, and even for those who have. And then it's going to go into the TED version of that, so let's, yeah, let's mute that before. But anyway, no, I can't mute it, because it's on that one. Anyway, it's my thing, look. Anybody tell me like that? Anyway. Has anyone seen Richard Ayoade do that in the first series of the IT Crowd? Yes. It's genius. Anyway, so the point being, or as a sort of very silly and spurious illustration of the fact that sometimes you want to know the parameters of the personal thing that is carrying out a potentially life-altering operation, and there are times when I would want to know because I would trust something more if I knew it was automated. But there are also times when I might feel more able to challenge a decision if I knew it was automated. For example, things like, I don't know if you know, but if you apply for jobs to large companies, although not Google, Google are very proud of the fact they get, I think, 2 million applications a day, and they don't do this. But most large companies, now no human reads your CV until it's been read by a machine. So quite a lot of times if you're applying to somewhere, particularly on a graduate scheme, you will be thrown out at the first stage by something that's basically just going, I'm looking at these grades and where you went, whatever, and I'm waiting, particularly in the States, for the first class action lawsuit that says, yes, but did you not realise that your school grade point average is very highly correlated with the kind of neighbourhood you grew up, which is very highly correlated with your socioeconomic status, which is very highly correlated with your ethnicity. So at some point this will be challenged, yeah.